Mr. Scheer, good to see you again.
Thanks for having me on.
For stopping by to see me. Well, let's start right at the top, I guess. Give me if you can, the Coles Notes version of what's to not like about this budget.
Well, you'll remember during the election campaign that the Liberals promised that this year, 2018, the deficit would only be $6 billion. It's 3 times that. It's 300% higher than their promise. That means my kids, my oldest son Thomas is 12, he'll be 40 before the budget is balanced under the current plan. That's not fair. We don't do that to our kids in our own households. We shouldn't allow the government to put that kind of new debt on the backs of future generations of Canadians. As interest rates go up, that debt becomes more expensive and limits the ability for governments to spend on important programs or react to things like NAFTA or worldwide recessions and things like that. So irresponsible new spending, higher taxes. They've thankfully have abandoned some of their attacks on small businesses, but they've really put a chill on that sector of our economy for months and months. So we'll wait and see what impact that has had on last year's GDP. Those are the biggest reasons why we're upset about this budget. They failed to actually deliver much. One of their excuses for going into deficit was that they were going to spend money on infrastructure. Infrastructure spending is being cut by $2.1 billion this year. So we've got the deficits without the infrastructure. At the same time, they're spending $500 million on an Asian infrastructure bank to spend on infrastructure projects in other countries. That doesn't make sense to us.
When you look at some of the social spending in here, is there something you'd eliminate? Well, more money for parental leave. Well, in broad terms, they're promising pay equity legislation. That a good thing?
Conservatives have always supported the idea that men and women should be paid equally for the same work that they do. That's a principle that we absolutely support. When we look at the parental leave, they are talking about adding on 5 weeks to the non-birth parent, so no extra time specifically for the mother. My plan, the Conservative plan, would actually make those EI benefits tax-free. That would be a more tangible way, a concrete example of supporting families who make the choice to raise their families. But one thing Canadians have to understand on this is that when the government, this government especially, when this government gives with one hand, they always take far more with the other. Taxes have gone up. Over 90% of Canadian middle-class families are paying higher taxes today than in 2015 when the Liberals took over. They're threatening a carbon tax. Billions of dollars of investment have left our country, taking jobs along with it because of the regulatory burden that this government has put on our natural resource sector. Other countries lowering their corporate taxes, this Liberal government raising them means a lot of jobs are at risk over the next few months and years.
How do you feel about the gender equity piece? The fact that every budget measure is scrutinized with a view to its impact on gender. With the whole thrust of this is to get more women into the workforce and keep them there. Are you okay with that? Is this something you support? Because they're talking about applying this analysis and at one point turning it into law, which means every government would have to continue to do that. Would your government continue to do that?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. We don't actually know what they're proposing. We don't know what the legislation will look like. We don't know what tools they're going to use to try to achieve this social goal. Conservatives absolutely believe in the principle that if there are systemic barriers that are preventing women to enter the workforce or to advance, that absolutely government should look at that
and
try to.
Do you believe there are systemic barriers that prevent women from more women? I mean, you look at the numbers, 90% of eligible, work-able men are in the workforce, 80% of women. And so, and a lot of studies point to the barriers that lead to that. Do you accept that obviously as a truism, that there are barriers to women in the workforce?
There are some barriers for sure. Some of it, it can be addressed through government policy. And our government previously, the Conservatives have looked at ways to address that. Some of the measures we brought in to make it easier for families to be flexible were precisely with a view to make it easier for women to make the choice to enter the workforce, or for those that have to advance at the same rate as men would. I believe our policies actually got results. Under the Conservative government.
Do you have a problem? This is a policy that the extra 5 weeks of parental leave to the non-birth parent.
Look,
it's designed to encourage more women to go back to work more quickly. Do you have a problem with that?
And those are the types of things that Conservatives have always looked at to address that issue, to make it easier for women to make that choice. As I said, my plan would make benefits tax-free. I think that's a more concrete plan. So the Canadians will know the Conservatives have better ideas than the Liberals do. But on the point of this, under the Conservative government, wages for women increased at a much higher rate than wages for men. So our policies got results, and what the Liberals have shown is that they failed to actually deliver on what they've promised. That's why we're asking Canadians not to be fooled by what's in this budget, because it's all talk at this point, and to actually judge them on whether or not they're able to implement any of it.
A couple of quick things to finish on. National Pharmacare program. They're launching an advisory panel on that. Do you support that?
Well,
do you support a national pharmacare plan?
You'll pardon me if I don't have confidence in one of Kathleen Wynne's ministers to undertake this program. Justin Trudeau today announced that one of Kathleen Wynne's ministers is leaving the Liberal government of Ontario to run this advisory panel.
Eric Hoskins, the former health minister in Ontario.
I do not have any confidence in anything coming out of Kathleen Wynne's office. Conservatives have always increased funding for provinces for healthcare. The entire time we were in government, the transfers to provinces for healthcare went up. The Liberal approach is to centralize and have an Ottawa knows best strategy to do it, but we don't know what's in the details. We don't know what they're actually doing.
But in principle, do you think there's a place for a national pharmacare plan, or should all of that be left to the provinces?
In general, we believe that that we respect the jurisdictions of different provinces. Federal government can make sure there's adequate funding. Some provinces have different types of solutions, right. And what this will, we don't even know what this will do. We'll have to wait and see.
But in principle, you don't support a national pharmacare plan.
What I'm saying is that we respect the provincial jurisdiction. We'll wait and see what comes out of this report. We'll wait and see what direction they want to go in before we pass judgment on it. I think that's a prudent thing for an opposition party to do.
And finish on this. Mr. Morneau was asked in his news conference today, which we'll show coming up, at length about why he's not taking sort of preventive measures for some of the impacts that Canada might feel because of the corporate tax cuts in the U.S. and maybe if NAFTA collapses. Should he have done something in this budget, and if so, what?
At the very least, he could have sent the signal by saying in his budget speech, that they are prepared to make Canada's economy more attractive to investment. We know the effect of when our largest trading partner has a lower tax rate. We've seen it before in previous years. It's very hard to keep capital and investments here in Canada. I've met with dozens and hundreds of people all across Canada. After the Liberals in Ontario have made energy costs so expensive, after this Liberal government's attack on small business, I've had people tell me that the only thing keeping them in Canada right now is a sense of patriotism. What Bill Morneau signaled today is that there's no help coming if NAFTA goes off the rails, or if the effects of tax cuts in other jurisdictions, and it's not just the U.S., many of our largest trading partners are lowering their tax rates to attract the investment that brings the jobs. And that's what Conservatives have to focus on, is that it's not just about the dollars, it's about the jobs that come with it. When a company decides to open up a plant in Canada, when they decide to move their head office here, when they decide to partner with a high-tech company here in Canada, that creates jobs for Canadians. That doesn't happen when our corporate taxes are so much higher, when our barriers to those investments are so much higher. Take a look at the natural resource sector. Billions of dollars have left our country, not just because tax rates are more attractive in other areas, but because this Liberal government has added so much new regulatory red tape that these projects become unviable. So we have a lot of concerns around those pieces as well.
All right, Leader of the Official Opposition, Andrew Scheer, thanks for your time.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.